Well, I've been waiting for like an hour for the weed eaters and lawnmowers and leaf blowers to stop in my neighborhood, but they're still going. I don't know if you can hear them in the distance. I don't record this in a soundproof room. It's in my studio shed, and it sounds pretty good, but you can definitely hear the weed eaters. And of course, anytime you're going to record audio, what happens? Yeah, cue the leaf blower, cue the weed eaters. But anyway, today I'm going to talk about shooting a movie in one location. And truth be told, this episode is a reminder for myself. Keep it simple, stupid. Hey guys, Blake Calhoun, and another episode of Almost Professional, the podcast about mobile filmmaking, indie filmmaking, DIY filmmaking, really all things filmmaking. And today, movie making with weed eaters in the background. God, they're still going. It's just unbelievable. If you're watching this on YouTube, I'm actually trying another experiment, which I do often. I'm using a Insta360 camera to record the behind the scenes video, I guess you'd call it, of the recording of this podcast. Nothing special, but I think it makes it more interesting to watch it on YouTube. I've tried my Osmo Action and that works okay. And then last episode, I used my iPhone in cinematic mode. I like that look, but it's kind of a tight shot. I like a wider shot when I'm doing a behind the scenes look. Before I talk about my one room movie concept, which by the way isn't new, and again, that's why I call this a reminder, I want to talk about a movie I watched recently that inspired this thinking. And that is one called The Guilty.
Now, an almost professional movie review.
So The Guilty is a movie I saw on Netflix, and it stars Jake Gyllenhaal. And it's a remake of a Danish film, I believe, of the same name, but obviously in the Danish language, not in English. The movie's good. It's well done. It's well acted. It actually is very suspenseful. And the whole thing takes place in basically one room. It's one location for sure. Although the beginning of the movie, I believe he sets up at his house and then he gets to the location, gets to his job. And his job is a 911 operator.
911, this is emergency operator 625.
I've just been robbed.
Okay, sir, I need to know where you are. Last name?
He's actually a police detective, maybe a homicide detective, I'm not sure, but he's been demoted because of something in his business life that I won't give away. That would be a spoiler. But I don't know if he's being punished or he's been, again, demoted or what, while he waits for this incident in his professional life to be resolved. And so the whole movie, it's kind of a real-time movie. It takes place over one evening in a 911 call center with basically just him. There's a few peripheral characters around him, some coworkers, and like a manager of the 911 crew, of the operator crew. But really, that's it. And somehow they managed to make that not only interesting dramatically, but interesting visually. And that's tough to shoot in one room and pull that off. And now it really is important to have good actors to make that work, but the screenwriting has to be good. The direction has to be good. Everything has to be good when you make a movie to make it enjoyable. But they really pulled it off in this one. So if you have Netflix, check it out. I don't want to go into too much detail other than to say that I found it super interesting that I was pulled in and curious to find out what happens next in a movie that was shot in one room with basically one actor talking to people on the phone. And I probably should have said that part earlier. He gets a phone call from a girl who's been kidnapped. And basically the whole movie is him trying to talk her through the scenario and then call other police to get help, to help her. And so in a weird way, it's almost like a radio play or a podcast in a strange way, because it's really just all audio. However, with the good direction and the good DP, and then again, the good performance from Jake Gyllenhaal, it all comes together and is actually a pretty visually interesting movie. Now, they did some smart things by having him get up and move around. He actually does go into another room, and they just create a lot of drama that way. And then the actors on the other end of the phone, those are really good. Those are A-list actors, as a matter of fact. I could be wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure one of the actors is Peter Sarsgaard, and the other actor is Ethan Hawke. And then there's a female lead, and I don't remember who that was. But it's interesting to have actors that have that kind of name recognition that aren't on screen, unless you're doing like an animated, a cartoon or something. Pretty unusual to have that in a movie like this where you never see the people, you just hear their voices. So really the only main character you see is Jake Gyllenhaal. But it works. Somehow it works. And you just need to watch it and check it out for yourself to really understand what I'm talking about here. This all ties into the premise of my podcast that I want to talk about today. And that is, if you're going to make an indie film, even a micro budget film in particular, I should say, shooting it in one location is really the only way to go. This movie, The Guilty, it had to have a decent sized budget just because of the people involved. And again, it was a remake. The set design was good. The actors were good. The direction was good. Of course, those kind of budgets are way out of our league. As when I say our, I mean the indie filmmaker, DIY filmmaker, mobile filmmaker. We're probably talking about free movies for the most part, working with your friends, or, spending 5, 10, 20 grand kind of thing. And you can do a good project today with that kind of money. Ultimately, what ends up being the thing that makes or breaks your film is the actor you can get in your movie. Not only for the performance, but also to help market it and sell it. For those type of budgets, and I'm talking about, it would be an unknown actor more times than not. But just make sure it's a good actor. Do not skimp on your actor. I just mentioned working with your friends, and if your friends are good actors, then yeah, hire them or get them in your project. If they're not, don't. I've made enough movies to know that the acting, especially on an indie film, is probably, and I know filmmakers don't like to hear this, but the actors are probably the most important thing you can do. Good actors can take a script that is maybe not as great, the dialogue I'm referring to, and make it sound believable, make it sound good. Yeah, the camera movement, the look, the DP is important. The direction is obviously very important as well. And the script, of course, is important. They're all important. But on a low-budget indie film, the actors can really make or break your project. How many times have you gone to a film festival, you sit down to watch the movie, and it looks amazing. The director has done a great job. The DP's done a great job. And the actor opens his mouth to start some little monologue, and it's as flat as a pancake. And you're like, this ain't good. And so, yeah, I went off on a little tangent there, as I often do, but make sure you have good actors. When I was just starting out, I read a book, and I've talked about this before, I believe, on this podcast, the Robert Rodriguez book, Rebel Without a Crew, how he made El Mariachi with, basically a one-man crew. And that's kind of how you would approach the movies I'm talking about. Now, his is a bad example for this setup because it was not shot in one location. It was actually very ambitious for what he did. If you have never seen El Mariachi, you got to go back and watch that. It is a well-crafted action movie with lots of locations and stunts, et cetera, et cetera. But that's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about taking that mentality, though, Rebel Without a Crew, and his idea was to take anything you had at your disposal and put it in your movie. Build your movie around that kind of thing. So let's say your family has a lake house. Maybe you write a story around using your family's lake house, or whatever that may be. It could be a car. It could be a treehouse in your backyard. It could be a swimming pool in your backyard. It could be whatever you want it to be, but write your story around that location or that material, those props that you have at your disposal, that you have available to you, and ideally that are free to use. And so like with this, The Guilty movie, if you want to do something in that vein, although, obviously don't go copy a movie that's already been made, but you could easily go into an office. Doesn't have to be a police station. This probably wasn't a police station. There's probably a set they built. But you could go into an office and make it look like a call center pretty easily. That wouldn't be too difficult. The other thing they did, this thing took place at night. And oftentimes when you're shooting stuff at night, you kind of get instant production value because the lighting's a little more dramatic. You can get nice bokeh in the background when you shoot out of a window. You've got lights in the city on. And then with this particular story, they were sitting in front of computers. And so you've got sort of built-in production value. So take those kind of things in mind as well. But if you think about it, even some of the most successful horror films of all time are set in one location. Horror films in particular do well. The haunted house idea, of course, those films are, way overdone. But ever so often, a nice low-budget indie comes along and grabs your attention. And so it's not a bad idea to stay in that genre. Genre films do the best, typically speaking, with unknown actors. You don't need a famous person necessarily in a horror film or in a sci-fi project either. Sci-fi gets a little bit trickier because usually you're dealing with visual effects and such, and that gets more expensive. But shooting in one location, making it a genre film, whether that's horror or supernatural, or like The Guilty was, I would say it was a genre film, but more in a cop drama, which, often don't do that well, truth be told, unless it's something like Training Day that stars, Ethan Hawke and, of course, Denzel Washington. But that is a different type of animal because obviously that was a big, massive production going all over the city of Los Angeles. But for most indies, I think genre is a good way to go. Staying in one location, keeping your crew very small. You could shoot a movie like that with really you could do it with a 2 or 3 person crew if you wanted to. You've got to have a director, a DP. The director could be the DP, but you really need to have an audio person. A gaffer or a grip would be good too. Again, keeping it very minimal in one location, you can cut down on expenses and crew because you can maybe pre-light it. You can light the whole thing almost like you would a TV set, a movie set, and make it to where you don't have to move lights around necessarily that much when you're shooting. That's one of the biggest time commitments when you're making a film is resetting, especially if you're doing a reverse shot. So you shoot one way and you got to flip the lights and shoot the other way if you have 2 characters talking. But the overall point here that I'm trying to make, and again, it's a reminder for myself, because a lot of my movies end up being like little mini Hollywood movies, which is something most people say don't make. And I kind of agree with that. One of my very first larger productions, and I say larger in quotes, it was maybe $200,000 movie, was an action film called Killing Down. And it's a good movie, I think. I'm biased, of course. I like the movie. It sold, it did well, and it's still available out there online to watch if you want to. But in hindsight, when you look at it, it's like a Bruce Willis movie, much smaller scale, without Bruce Willis. And so when you look at it like that, it's sort of like, don't make a movie that a general audience that doesn't know you or doesn't really care about any film, they just want to be entertained. Don't make a movie that they could watch that already has big name actors in it. Does that make sense? You need to make a movie that's more interesting from a conceptual idea, the concept, especially if you have no name actors in it, and especially if it's micro budget, versus doing something that Hollywood has already done and just making it like a mini Hollywood movie. I think that's good advice for anyone, no matter if you're making micro budget or even Indiewood films. Do something different. Do something like The Green Knight. I've mentioned David Lowery before. He's a friend of mine. Of course, The Green Knight was a $15 million movie. It was produced by A24. However, he started just like anyone. He did a 15-minute short film called Pioneer, shot it on a red camera at the studio that I work out of. This was like 10 plus years ago. And now he's making really whatever he wants. He's working on Peter Pan right now, a live action Peter Pan for Disney. He did the remake of Pete's Dragon several years ago. And then he did a Ghost Story. He's got a unique career, which I think a lot of indie filmmakers would like to emulate, where he does micro budget stuff or small indie stuff that he likes to do. And then he does the bigger budget that I don't know if they are as passionate for him or not. I'm sure they are because he puts his own spin on them. But when you're making a movie for Disney, I believe Pete's Dragon was $65 million. Even the director loses a little bit, probably a lot of control. But the point being, a little bit like Soderbergh, Steven Soderbergh, he goes back and forth between indie and Hollywood stuff. But David Lowery has such an interesting perspective to his films, whether you like them or not. They're more character studies than anything. They don't have typically very strong narratives, his films, but that's his style. And it's cool. I like what he does, and I like that he's unique, and that's kind of the bigger point. Don't make many Hollywood movies. Create something with your unique voice. Keep it simple. Shoot it in one room. I would probably, again, just to reiterate, make it a genre piece. And if you've noticed, I haven't mentioned what to shoot on because I don't care what you shoot on. I know I have a YouTube channel all about iPhone filmmaking, mobile filmmaking. But when it comes to your indie film like this, shoot it on whatever you want to shoot it on. The new iPhone would be great because you can shoot ProRes, but use a Blackmagic camera, use a Sony mirrorless, whatever you want to do. Don't worry as much about that part as what story you want to tell. Don't get bogged down by the technology, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Because all that will do is allow you to make excuses. I mean, now the iPhone has ProRes, and people will still be saying, well, I'm going to hold off and not make a movie until it shoots in ProRes log. Right now it does shoot in ProRes HDR. Or I'm going to wait until the sensor gets a little bit bigger. I mean, the excuses go on and on. And again, I'm kind of reminding myself about this because I've done this a lot too. Make excuses about why you don't want to make something. Right now, there are no excuses. There's so many cameras available to you. The Blackmagic Pocket 4K is still one of the best values out there. The $1,200 camera, roughly $1,200 US, and you can shoot amazing images with that camera. So don't let the camera bog you down. Consider making a one-room movie, hire good actors, and I think you'll be surprised what you can create, especially just using a little bit of imagination and creativity. For those interested, I am working on a smartphone cinematography 102 course. My 101 course has been pretty popular, had it out for about a year and a half. I'm going to do an additional course. This one focused more on the nitty-gritty, the details of how to use various gear. The first course was really more about the overall how-to. It's a 101 course. Framing, composition. I didn't get into how to use filters necessarily, why to shoot anamorphic, why to shoot telephoto, that kind of thing. It was more of a 30,000 foot overview. And in my 102 course, I'm going to go into more of a deep dive into how to do certain things, like why to use a grad filter and so on. So look for that coming. I'm in 2022. We're nearing the end of 2021 right now. And then, of course, if you're interested in learning about Filmic Pro or color correction and LumaFusion or smartphone audio production, I have a series of courses right now for those. And those courses are something that I really do enjoy creating. They also help support my website and my YouTube channel. And so if you're interested in those, check it out on my website, iphonographers.tv. But as I like to say, don't wait to create. There are no excuses today. Just get out there and make your micro-budget, one-location movie. Well, this has been another episode of Almost Professional. I'm your host, Blake Calhoun, and I look forward to talking to you in the next episode. And yeah, there's an airplane going over.